John McMullen,
Or
97.3 ESPN.com. John, how are you, pal?
Doing well. That I would have been the same guy in that situation. Clueless when it comes to stick.
Yeah. I don't have any – I like how people, too, like, look down upon you. Like, what do you mean you don't know how to drive stick? I'm like, what the hell do I care? I just want the car to move.
Exactly.
It's not like an adventure for me. I'm not, like, looking to have extra – right? I'm not looking to have extra fun while I'm driving. Just get me there.
Not even come up in my entire life.
No.
Everything's automatic these days. That's a good thing.
That's right. All right, you wrote at 97.3ESPN.com. Really an interesting story regarding the Eagles because Gareon Conley, he is a potential target for them at number 14, right? I mean, if they had a guy at the top of the very top of their list, he might be the guy. And now his name comes out, targeted in a sexual assault situation, and you wonder, 48 hours before draft time, John, how that affects not only him, but the Eagles at 14.
Oh, it affects him greatly, and obviously it affects the Eagles because there's no question he was one of the guys in the mix to be selected in that spot.
Does that insinuate that he would no longer be in the mix?
Yeah, I would say he's out of the mix simply because it has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. We saw sort of the exact same scenario with La'el Collins a couple of years ago, who was a surefire first-round pick. News broke that his ex-girlfriend was murdered, and the police wanted to speak to him. Now, he had nothing to do with it. They never named him as a potential suspect. They just needed some background information. But the timing was such that it couldn't get cleared up before draft day. And he went from first-round pick to undrafted, eventually signed with the Dallas Cowboys. Same situation here. I mean, there's just not enough time to get all this cleared up. And I don't think there's any question Gareon Conley's no longer going in the first round.
Wow, really?
The only question is, where does somebody take a shot on the third day later in the process? And it's really, at this stage, it's out of the GM's hands. That's an owner's decision. That if you'll allow a team to take a shot at a player. I mean, it's just the timing is horrible for him. If he's innocent and he's got nothing to do with it, it's a horrible thing. It's tremendously bad luck. Obviously, no one's going to care if he is involved, nor should they. But from an NFL's team standpoint, he's no longer a first-round pick.
That's really interesting because we know Sidney Jones is hurt. So what has this done now to the cornerback class, specifically in that 14 area? Because Sidney Jones going down changed a lot. If you're taking a second guy out of the mix in what was thought of to be a very deep corner class, and it still is, but that really changes the dynamics at that spot.
Yeah, it does, and I've been arguing that for weeks on this show. I think the Sidney Jones injury is partially the reason Gareon Conley got up as high as he did in the speculation to be really a potential top 10 pick because Sidney Jones was no longer there after tearing his Achilles at his pro day. So, yeah, what looked like a tremendously deep group at the top and throughout the second round doesn't look nearly as deep at the top, really. You're talking two of the three best guys are not out of the equation in the first half of the draft. You can't pick Jones there. You can't pick Conley there. So, yeah, I mean it affects the entire league, and it certainly affects the Philadelphia Eagles because they happen to be perhaps the most needy team in professional football at the cornerback position.
That's no doubt about it, and he will not attend the draft now. So, I mean, obviously, where there's, I don't want to say where there's smoke, there's fire, meaning that he's guilty, but I'm saying that he knows that there's a distraction around him to the point where he's not even attending the draft. John, I seen a mock draft that had him going number 6. I mean, as high as number 6. I haven't seen him any higher than that, but that was higher than Lattimore, which I was surprised at. So this young man's career has really changed in the last, couple of hours.
Yeah, and I had him going to the Eagles in my mock Eagles draft, and that's why this thing is so fluid, and it really does go up till Wednesday night, and until you get selected. And this is a perfect example of something coming out of nowhere. Nobody had any indication. The first, there was a Cleveland TV station that reported it first, and then you started put the pieces together, and obviously. You start thinking about Ohio, you start thinking about Ohio State, and you start putting the pieces together, and there it was Gareon Conley. And again, the timing is an issue. Even if he's completely exonerated, it's going to affect his draft status and affect it greatly.
That has really changed things, guys. I mean, you look at Gareon Conley was a guy that you really, you listed 4 guys yesterday for Philadelphia. Let me get your, let's dive a little deeper into some of those guys. Charles Harris, to me, why would you think the Eagles would be so interested? He seems like a 3-4 guy.
Well, I think a lot of people have said that. I think first, there's 2 things to that. I think there's a little bit, especially when you're talking about pass rushers. I think the 3-4 versus 4-3 argument is sort of passé. It's more, most teams will use the terminology edge rusher now, and most guys who are asked to rush the passer can do so in a 4-3 or a 3-4 if they're really good at it. The problem tends to be from a 3-4 perspective, you need to at least be somewhat competent in coverage. So my theory is if you can play in a 3-4, you can certainly play in a 4-3 as a weak side edge rusher. So I don't think that's a problem. I think the Eagles certainly are in that camp and their belief that he could certainly do it. But while I say that, I don't agree with them. I think it would be a big mistake if he was the guy the Eagles took off the board at 14. But I've heard it from multiple sources. They really like the kid.
John, I know we're talking about 3-4 and 4-3. How about Reuben Foster from Alabama? Would the Eagles have any interest there at 14? He seems like a 3-4 inside guy.
Well, he's a tremendous football player, and he's got another issue. He could be there. Now, 2 weeks ago, it wouldn't even been an option for Philadelphia potentially at 14, but he failed a drug test at the combine. Was a diluted sample. So now the question for him is similar thing. He's going to fall a little bit. Will he fall all the way to 14? I think that's a real possibility. Do the Eagles take a leap? It's concerning because we've seen numerous guys, and let's be honest, and I'm not going to run from it. It's marijuana related. So the rules of this game, whether you like it or not, is that there are structured penalties for consistent marijuana use. And the concern when you try to look into these kids is if you can't stop for the biggest job interview of your life, are you going to be able to stop long term? And we've seen it with Randy Gregory. We've seen it with Josh Gordon. We've seen it with Justin Blackmon. All really, really talented kids, but what good are they if they're not available to you? So yeah. I would be very wary of taking Reuben Foster in the first round of the draft because I don't know if I can count on him.
Yeah, that whole situation, I mean, in a former NFL tight end, a guy that I know went to college with him, Anthony Beck, just tweeted out, like, guys, stay in your house for the next 5 days. Like, I can't believe that people are getting into trouble this late in the process here. We were talking about this at the start of the show. Like, somebody had said, like, there's more red flags with this group. More the NFL investigators for each team. Each team has an investigator. They've been more busy putting in the overtime hours trying to chase down all these leads and all these accusations than any other year before. Yeah, and so that changes a lot of things, a lot of dynamics in the draft because – and I wonder how much of that is social media related. That's so much more, that there are so many more red flags.
Well, you have to look at it a number of ways. You look at a kid, failing a drug test at the combine. To me, from a team's perspective, that's more concerning than what went on with, say, Laramie Tunsil last year. And that was really social media and dropped at the worst time possible during the draft when he had that video of him surfacing smoking with a mask on, and everyone was up in arms and saying, how could you do this? But remember, that's not a failed test. It's really, 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 and I use that term 3 times, easy to pass the NFL's testing for marijuana.
Right.
So when you are Randy Gregory or you're a Justin Blackman, you failed at least 4 times before you're suspended for a year. So we're not talking 1 failure. We're not talking 2 failures. We're not talking 3 failures. And then as it continues to go through the process, some of these guys have failed 5, 6, 7 times. That tells you they can't stop. And until they change the rules, and many people are trying to get that done, including people from the NFL and teams' perspective, because their mentality is, look, we can't keep losing these guys for something that at least socially younger people do not think is an issue. And you're sort of fighting against the tide. And at some point you throw up your hands and say, all right, let's just let them do it. I think eventually that's going to happen in this league. But as of today,
almost in all of sports, John.
Yeah. As of today, the system is the system. And if I can't count on you to be on the field and follow and just pass 1 marijuana test a year, well, you're no use to me. So that's why I kind of throw those guys off my board.
John McMullen with us talking NFL draft. John, the Miami Herald's reporting that the Dolphins would be happy with either Tennessee defensive end Derek Barnett or Missouri defensive end Charles Harris at 22 overall. Eagles looking at defensive end as well at 14. Which way do you think that shakes out?
Well, the Eagles, to me, we're down to 4 different players thinking about, and one of them was Conley and one of them was Harris, and Christian McCaffrey was in the conversation, and so was John Ross. Now I think you have to start expanding out because there's a potential that McCaffrey's not going to be there. There's a potential that Ross is not going to be there. I don't think you can take Conley. We just discussed that. And that leaves you with Harris. I don't know if I'm comfortable with him at that 14th slot. In fact, I would bet, from a personal standpoint, I would think that's a bad pick, to be honest. I would have to start looking at a player like Corey Davis or someone of that nature. But I haven't gotten that from people close to the Eagles. So we'll see the way they think. But from all indications, they like Harris a lot.
Yeah, now if those 2 guys are both there at 14, because I've seen Barnett as in the top 5 in some places, right? So if he fell to 14 and Harris is on the board too, to me that would be a huge mistake. Don't you think? A huge mistake. Which way would they and should they go if Barnett and Harris were their choice?
Yeah, I think Barnett's a better player, so personally I'd go in that direction. But I think the Eagles like Harris better, and we'll see how it shakes out, or if they even go edge rusher. But we always talk about the importance of positions in the NFL, and I always say after quarterback, the second one is edge rusher. And those guys, like quarterbacks, tend to get pushed up the board. And to be honest, I don't like either player, Barnett or Harris, at number 14. I don't think they belong at that spot. I don't think they're good enough. But edge rushers are so important in this league, they tend to get pushed up the board.
John, how real is it that the Eagles could trade down from that 14th overall if the guy they want is no longer available?
It's always a possibility, but as we get closer to the draft, there's so many rumblings of teams wanting to trade down.
Right.
At some point, it becomes impossible.
Well, let me interject with that. How realistic, because I threw this scenario out earlier, is that Jordan Matthews is that piece that they use, and maybe take a guy like a Jordan Matthews at 14 to get an extra pick later on that they use to get better at corner?
Well, it's always possible. I think if the Eagles do go in a direction of receiver and get a John Ross or even a Corey Davis, I think then it's in play that Jordan Matthews could be on the move, and you can go in a veteran direction to try and get a corner, or you can try to move up in the second round. You can do a lot of things. I mean, that's the one thing. We know Howie Roseman likes to trade, and he's got a lot of not only draft picks to utilize, but he's got veteran players that he'd like to move, starting with Michael Kendricks and Jason Kelsey. And as I said, if they take a wide receiver, I think all of a sudden Jordan Matthews is in that equation. So Howie likes to move, and at some point he's going to move. At some point in this draft, there's going to be trades, and we'll see if they're going up or down.
All right, John, a couple NFL news and notes. Adrian Peterson going to play for the Saints. Is he going to be the backup to Ingram? Do you eventually see him taking over? Can Peterson play anymore?
I don't know. We're going to find out. I mean, if he can play, I find it very hard to believe that he won't beat out Mark Ingram, but his skill set doesn't project well as a backup. So I think it's one or the other. I think he's either the Saints starting running back or he's not going to play. And they might try to use him in a situational role for a couple weeks, situational role, and then they'll quickly figure out he's not going to help us in that type of role, and he'll just go to the bench. And it's really, the contract tells you all you need to know, and where he landed. The fact that he's getting paid $3.5 million, and he went to a team that's not considered to be a legitimate playoff contender. Nobody wanted Adrian Peterson, and that is for a number of reasons. He's 32 years old. He's coming off an injury-plagued season, and when he was out there, he wasn't very effective. And it's really sad if you think about it. I wrote about it today on FanRag Sports. Some of the legends in this sport, Johnny Unitas going all the way back, ending his career in San Diego, Joe Namath limping off with the Rams, Emmitt Smith, how bad he was with the Arizona Cardinals. I think that's going to be Adrian Peterson in New Orleans.
A couple other quick hits here for you. Looks like Martavius Bryant has been reinstated. He's got to go through a bunch of stuff here. He can't attend practices. He can't.
There's another guy, by the way.
Right. Well, he's right up your alley. We could all sit on the dock of the bay and have a couple doobies together. Pass the Dutchie, brother.
Very, very talented guy. Didn't play last year for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Not a snap.
By the way, no. And by the way, if you think about where Pittsburgh was, and as far as they went, what if Martavis Bryant was out there for 16 games? It could have been really, really helpful for that team. And unfortunately, it's difficult. And now we'll see. Hopefully, he can traverse the policy and get back on the field.
All right, got the NFL draft coming up, in case you didn't hear. Sports Bash Live.
That makes you laugh.
97.3 ESPN. John McMullen will be live at the draft, and we will see him. He'll be up there tomorrow.
Johnny Mac,
tomorrow, right?
You're driving the stick shift. That's you're taking the first shift, and then Gil's taking the second leg.
Are you guys picking me up on the way there?
I thought you were going tomorrow to go get your stuff. You're going to be clean sailing.
I am going I will be clean sailing. That's why I'm going tomorrow. For that reason.
I want you to give us the blueprint like the guy from Prison Break. I want a tattoo on your back of how to get in and out of that place.
That's going to be difficult. That's why I'm going tomorrow. Tomorrow, you only got to go to the Sheraton.
Right.
And you don't got to deal with all the craziness.
Yeah. All right, man. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, guys.